It's Clark and Perry on the case. Da-na-na-na. Clark and Perry
Do what it takes.
Da-na-na-na. Clark and Perry investigate.
The activities and interests of local artists in the Windy City's finest throughout both Lethbridge and Medicine Hat, Alberta. Available on TELUS, Optic TV, On Demand, VidFlex, YouTube, and more for limited time only. Terms and conditions apply.
Da-na-na-na.
Hello, once again, to the Windy City's finest. I'm Clark, he's Perry, and we are joined today by a smither, or a forger, I don't know the right terms, William here.
Hey, it's good to be here today. I'm William Baliko, and I'd go by blacksmith. But
Blacksmith.
the smithy or something like that is also very valid for sure. They're all good terms. But yeah, blacksmith.
I've been so excited to do this feature, folks, because I don't have too much experience when it comes to it. I only have Forge and Fire a couple episodes, but we are actually going to not be in a backyard or anything. We're actually going to be at the Fort Whoop-Up, here, local historical site here in Lethbridge. It's vast. I can't wait to kind of give an internal tour.
Yeah.
You do a bit of work here.
I do. I'm here this summer. I've been here monthly, a little bit more now and again, depending. And I'm here often on special occasions, like they do a Christmas thing, usually a Halloween event as well. So I come here and smith live for them, you know, make gifts for the kiddos. It's always a good time. And then like depending on the year, sometimes I'm here even weekly. So yeah.
Well, I haven't been here since I was a kid. I'm so excited to go inside and just kind of check out the space once more. It sounds like a new exhibit has come in. So
yes, indeed.
All right, folks, let's take a trip inside.
Come on in. Welcome to Fort Whoop-Up.
It's the big gates and everything. This has got the whole huge aesthetic. Thank you again. Big shout out to Fort Whoop-Up for allowing us to use the space, of course.
Totally, yeah. No, this is definitely one of my favorite spaces to come and blacksmith. It's so cool being part of the history and just you really feel that connection.
Yeah.
There's been such a prominent cultural focus on blacksmithing in southern Alberta and in the West in general. So it's just so cool to be part of that heritage and sharing that with the public.
Well, it's always been around and it's a big popular thing, but I know that the community it looks like we got a couple ponies as well too.
Yes, we do, yeah. Yeah, the famous Fort Whoop-Up ponies. Come on by, give them a bit of feeding. They're a lot of fun,
And it looks like I think you mentioned a community garden out here as well too.
Yeah, we have this lovely community garden that went in a couple years back.
Yeah.
It's wonderful the amount of things that grow here. We actually have a surprising microclimate here that allows for some of the stuff that you'd even see in the Okanagan and stuff. It's beautiful.
Right.
All kinds of fruits and vegetables. You get a number of even nuts and things as well here in southern Alberta and in Lethbridge. So.
Well, and you couldn't ask for better weather today for the growing season. So
that's lovely.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and this heat, I know it's a bit balmy, and you'll see it gets even toastier with the forge, but it's great for making those veggies sweet, adding that extra flavor.
Amazing. All right, let's go take a trip inside
and do it.
See what's indoors.
Yeah.
Neat. So there's the internal gift shop here for the most part. We're not going to be able to show most of it, but I am pretty impressed.
Got to save something for when you visit,
And so this is the new exhibit that you mentioned as well, right?
So recently completed within the last year, the Nitsitapi exhibit. This has an incredibly beautiful mix of history on the Blackfoot peoples and what they were doing with this land and how they honor and have always cared for it. It's really quite amazing. It's also quite cool to see the interplay in history. There were positive things for sure that happened. And this fort itself, Fort Whoop-Up, was a trading fort. And so, some of that still wasn't the greatest of things that happened, but a lot of it was collaborative, at least in some ways here and there. So
good or bad, it's always important to kind of conserve history so that you never repeat the bad of history, right?
Exactly.
So, no, that's an important thing to kind of remember. But okay, we're not going to take too much of a tour inside the exhibit. Folks will have to check that out themselves. But that's good to know that that's new and recent for those who have kind of frequented this space.
Yeah.
So this is.
Welcome to Fort Whoop-Up. This is our courtyard.
This really just opens up the space.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is amazing. and so you mentioned that this place was a trading fort?
It was. Yeah, there's a couple brothers who came up from the States and built this with the help of a very incredible blacksmith as well. We'll talk about him a bit more in a bit. But yeah, no, this was a trading fort, you know, firearms, furs, alcohol, tobacco, just kind of whatever, of course, your essentials and such as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's quite
This
a place.
is amazing. So is this where you would keep horses? Is this like the stable area?
This is kind of a bit of a staging area for sure.
Staging area.
You could have some penned here, but for the most part, where we saw the ponies, there'd be some there.
Okay.
Yeah, and then out, you know, just past this staging area, there's a whole nother field as well, and that's where the livestock would have been out to pasture and field and enjoying it. So yeah,
this place is super vast. Like I'm hoping Perry's running around trying to get the best shots that he can, but this is really cool to kind of just be in the space here.
Yeah.
So in the center, it looks like we have kind of like the communal area where everybody's able to kind of get together and maybe have a meal of some kind. But it looks like we got the parlor just behind Perry there. And then, so like, what else do these buildings kind of serve? Are they more barracks or?
Kind of stuff going on in here. So we do have the barracks and living quarters. Also the RCMP, when they first came out west here, they also stayed here for a bit. They were actually very grateful to have this space because they were a little underprepared. And probably would have frozen to death without it. But this was phenomenal. So there's a separate space that they inhabited while they were here. There's of course a trader's kind of shop and everything, which is quite amazing. That's pretty cool to see with, you know, actual furs and everything.
It's very important to kind of just keep in mind, like the Canadian winters would be so bitter that shelter was just so important. So the RCMP almost like being headquartered here almost at the beginning almost could have been like the first steps into what is now Lethbridge.
For sure, yeah. And like again, like the coal that was found here and stuff definitely had a big draw, and that was part of it as well. But yeah, no, and this is very naturally, like the Blackfoot people, this area here is naturally a really nice little cradle of civilization in the coulees here. This river bottom is quite conducive to life, and you know, it stays temperate enough that you can grow things. But it does get pretty cool. Not as cool as further up north, though. So it was a good spot to winter. And yeah, definitely the winters are harsh here with the wind and all. But you'll kind of see on the interior and such that they did a pretty good job of insulating. And then once you got things cooking in there, whether that was with the stoves or actually with the forge, it warms up.
I was gonna say, I think it's like 24 degrees out right now,
something
and
around
I think we're not gonna be thinking about winter anytime soon.
No,
we'll be hoping for it, but
and quite
it's gonna be pretty.
Yeah, the fall and winter, it's kind of nice to smith in that period. You know, it's a bit more of a challenge because stuff cools as you pull it out real quick. You only get a few hits on it, and then you got to be warming it up again. But you feel a lot nicer. So yeah, it's a good time.
Okay. Well, I'm super excited. It looks like we got the blacksmithy right over there as well too. So let's take a trip over there and see what's inside.
Welcome to the blacksmith shop of Fort Whoopa.
My goodness.
I love this place.
I love how this place is stylized, well kept, I guess, the aesthetic. Like all this wood and the furs insulating the doorways as well too. Is very,
get a good look at that, because that is accurate. That's how it would have been for sure. A lot of this is a one-to-one. This is not the exact fort. The original one was a little further down the river valley. But it is otherwise as close as we could get it. So it's quite an impressive space, and you do get a real feel of what it was like when this was actually habitable and being used. It's quite amazing.
And so these are the tools of the trade, pretty much, that we got in front of us. This is there's a ton here.
There is.
They don't show this near in Forge and Fire that much as well too. But this is of course the plain steel anvil.
This is an anvil. It is cast. The majority of them are, and like this is a lovely one where we have a really nice horn. You can tell that this has been used a lot. Not just by me, it's been used longer. And it's been here, it does live here at the fort. but it is a fantastic piece of equipment, and I really enjoy using it for sure.
Yeah.
And you'll enjoy it too today. We'll get your hands dirty.
Okay.
Anytime.
All right. Sounds good. I haven't done this before, but what's the gear that
Oh,
you
man.
typically need
Well,
to get involved in
we-
something like this?
Honestly, the starting part, you need a hammer and
Okay.
you need some steel. And then the rest you kind of slowly build on. It's definitely a good idea to have some safety glasses.
Okay.
And so we'll do that probably a little bit later. I'll
Mhm.
pass these to you now so
Okay.
you have them.
So I have
Feel
them.
free to put them on at any point, but I'll let you know when they're necessary.
All right.
And then we do have gloves as well. I hear you were right-handed like myself, which
That's
is
right.
very handy because that means you're mostly gloving your left hand. And for
Okay.
the most part, I'll do a lot of that, which is the hand that's playing with the hot stuff. Yeah, which will be hot in just a moment here. And then your right is the one that is actually going to be doing the hammering.
Doing the smithing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it
Sounds
doesn't
good.
hurt to have if you want a right on, but you are okay without as well for now.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get her roaring.
Well, I got a couple questions too.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
the equipment that we're going to be using, it looks like we got something based off of propane, and this is something that
Yeah.
was what used to be used
Exactly.
as well too.
Exactly. This is actually very accurate to what William Gladstone, who was the blacksmith who helped build the fort, he and 40 Métis fellas were the ones who constructed this. I believe it was over a couple of years.
Yeah.
So pretty efficient build time. And it was, especially at that time, essential to have a blacksmith because
Right.
think about it. Anything that's made out of a metal, you needed that guy for.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's door hinges or wheels for your carts, tools, all kinds of things, would have been absolutely necessary, even just nails, right? Just for putting this together. So all that was necessary to have a blacksmith.
And each one theoretically unique in and of itself,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
It
for
really
sure.
came to like a love of the craft.
Oh, yeah.
After being able to,
Mhm.
once you knew good blacksmith, it's like nowadays where you know a good barber
Yeah,
or something,
yeah,
right?
honestly,
you
yeah.
always go to them.
You always came back, if you came back and got something fixed or got something
Yeah.
new and it didn't break, you were coming back to that guy for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
this is still operational
It
for the
is,
most part.
It is. Yeah, let me walk you through this. So
Yeah,
this is
how does
a
this work?
coke forge or a coal forge. Coke
Okay.
is the blacksmithing term. How that would have been is simply would have had the actual coals and embers in this space here that I believe you can see.
Okay.
Yeah, and that would be lit up. You'd get it going, and then you would be adding bellows, giving the bellows some work here, which pushes air in there, forces
Feeding
the
tons of
into
air.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
And that's how you get it hot. And then your challenge as a smith, especially back in the day here, was keeping that a nice steady temperature as you're working with what you got. And so you would have had your tools in the fire, and then you would have been moving over to the anvil, which would have been set up a little differently just so that it was more efficient space-wise.
better
The less movement, the better.
Yep.
The closer to the fire, the better. And so you would have been going at it as much as you could. And then as you got it reheating, you'd be cranking her again, keeping it going. And this setup is fantastic for a single smith because you have the bellows up here and close, so you don't even need to walk away.
Just
but
to bellow it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Amazing.
It's amazing.
And then underneath here would have like, would this
You'd
be the
have-
coal fire or would
Yeah,
this
you'd have more of a fire in here if you needed, just kind of depending on how it was going and what you were doing really. So like back in the day, especially if you were actually doing the heat, you'd get it going in here and then have like the actual coke up here, and that combination makes for quite a nice even fire if you're on top of it. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
amazing.
Mhm.
So we have kind of, you would put the coals in here, so that would be the fuel source,
Yeah.
and then most of your work would occur here.
Mhm.
And in contrast to what we have with the propane,
Yeah,
we have fuel source being the propane
that's right.
coming in
that's
from
right.
the top,
Yeah,
and then this is where most of the work kind of happens. as well,
exactly.
too.
Yeah,
Most
this
of the
is
heat.
a double burner, which is really quite nice, and the back does pop open as well, which allows me to do some lengthier items. Swords basically is the only reason
The
you
cool
need that.
stuff.
Yeah. Longer tools and stuff.
Yeah.
But it is fantastic. This has been hand built. There's a fella here in town who I've learned a lot about blacksmithing from. His name is Graham, and he passed this on to me a few years back, which was huge. I was a student at the time, and that was really what propelled me into this, was having my own forge and being able to
Having your own tools really
Yeah.
kind of gives
Oh,
you
yeah.
no excuse to start doing it,
Yeah,
right?
you gotta
Yeah.
get at it then. Yeah, and it's
So
amazing.
what was your first tool or first experiment into this?
Oh man. So I remember I started learning here at the University of Lethbridge. I had finished a art degree in Red Deer and then transferred down and had been into metalwork. I'd done a lot of bronze casting like this piece here and such.
Amazing.
I love working with hot metals in general. And that's something that's always been a pleasure. But I was curious about blacksmithing. I was very into the Middle Ages, as you folks will see in other segments here.
Yep.
And like I just loved it. And I was like, blacksmithing, that would be cool. Like, you know, that how do you get into that and stuff? And here at the university, they actually have a little blacksmithy set up. It was old and not great condition at the time. It hadn't been used for about 7 years. And I approached the art techs and the fella who I was working under for my senior thesis. And I was like, can I like get that working and go at it? And does anybody around know smithing? Like, can I? And they were like, fire away, like go for it. And no pun intended. But yeah, like it was a good time. So yeah, I cleaned it up, got it going. And then like the rest was history. I was really ambitious with that one. To get back to your question, I was like, I'm going to make myself some tongs, which, you know, blacksmiths, most of our tools, we do make most of the tools that we use.
It looks like we have some
they're
really
very
cool things arrayed
customized
here.
often to what you're doing and what you need. And I was like, oh, I'm going to make some tongs, which was like, you know, a good starter thing because there was a lot of learning. But, oh man, that was a rough first project. They did not fully get completed. Partially because of I found out halfway through I was using the wrong type of steel as well. But it was a great learning process. I eventually did make a pair of tongs and lift and punch and a few other tools. I did even make myself a hammerhead, which like was usable, but I've certainly gotten better. And nowadays I'll
made some better ones and purchase your own stuff as well too. So where are those first tools? Like, are they with
you know? I actually
home?
do have a handful of those still kicking around, just sentimentally and such. A few of them actually did make it into some art exhibits as well. I created, at that time I was doing a lot of contemporary or conceptual work, I should say, and something that was really fascinating, not just to myself, but a lot of the people in the art program at the time was like the sound. I'm sure there were people who didn't enjoy it, but a number of people spoke up being like, oh, it's so cool hearing that throughout the 8th level of the university.
There's like a rhythm to it, right?
For sure. And especially with me, like I was really focusing on ergonomics, trying to learn the right way of doing it so that I can do this for years. And there is like quite a beautiful rhythm that gets going as you get into it.
So what is important about that rhythm? It's so unanimous. I find
this is where you see the art out of the trade in this. Blacksmithing is one of those ones where there's so much that's personal about it. Like you're wrestling with the metal, and you'll see it, you'll feel it, even just off this little bit here. Like there's so much that you are balancing in keeping the metal hot enough to work, but you don't want to be excessive about that. When we have this going, the steel is burning off carbon every time that we heat it up and becoming less steel and more just iron. And so that's something that, you know, you have to be mindful of depending on what you're making. And so again, a smith, some of us will, you know, use that tempo as a way of measuring, keeping that in mind. And in general, like it's personal. It's one of those things where it depends on the smith, what they're thinking, what they've got that motivation going for. For me, it really does help keep track of the time is a big part of it for myself. And also just like the pattern, having a nice pattern, it helps you
with the workflow.
Squarely, make sure that you got a nice even connection going. It's quite amazing for sure.
The rhythm, of course, into the artistry, but I think even to a practical sense, it allows you to kind of, you know, get your breathing in sync and allow for like a longevity of the work to be completed as well too. That's amazing.
the best way to experience it is to actually see it and be part of it. So
Okay,
let's get
well,
her fired
I
up.
think let's get her
Yeah.
started with that.
Awesome.
All right, so what exactly do you have to do in order to get this thing going?
Basically, this is a pretty fun, has a bit of personality, this forge.
Okay.
It's one that you have to get started with a bit of fire. So the first thing we're going to do is turn on our propane, get it feeding to the forge.
Okay. And how long does this propane typically last you?
So a little tank like this, depending on, because there's a gauge there that allows me to allow more or less through, depending on the project we're doing, and I'll kind of explain a bit more of that later as we're going into it. But as we're, depending on what you're doing, you might want more. And yeah, like I'll explain that a bit more.
Sure.
But yeah, you let it through, and then these are actually open. If you come over here, it's kind of neat to see.
Okay.
So that allows, as the propane's going through, it's actually sucking air in there as well, which is nice because then we don't need a bellows. Which is one of those lovely things that just makes life so much easier.
No, this is very, oh man, there's a lot of satisfying movements coming from this, but but I think
it
that's
does
probably
get
best.
old.
Yes, it does.
So yeah.
It does get old.
It's one of those things where, you know, there's enough with the smithing that will wear on you. And so when you can streamline that process and make it a bit more efficient, it is quite nice to do so.
It's good to
propane's lovely that way because it just goes. And
it's good to appreciate and admire history, but also really nice to enjoy modernity as well too.
Definitely, yeah. It's always a bit of a balance for sure. So now that we've got the feed going, we're going to get a bit of fire started in there.
Okay, let's see.
And you know what? We're going to put a bit more material in there too, just so that we make this a bit more efficient in starting. And one of the things that I should mention, a good rule of blacksmithing for safety-wise, is that the hot metal looks like cold metal for the most part. Once you get like to a certain heat, it'll look different, and you'll see that soon. But some of this is warm. I had it going a little bit earlier, and you can't tell. It's all steel, but you can tell when you touch it. So just keep that in mind. These bits out here are nice and cool still, but that is something that's important as we're working.
I'll admit, for viewers who may or may not have noticed, I already grazed the top of this. We did do like a pre-test firing, and yes, it was warm. I was like,
for sure. But yeah,
not hot. But
let's get her going. Get her fired up. And actually, if you wouldn't mind going around to the back there and then popping open that hatch.
Yep.
Thanks. Good job. There we go.
That'll
some good help.
Noises right there.
Oh yeah,
that's cool.
Because we need a bit of airflow for this for sure. The propane does eat a lot of the oxygen, and in a small space like this, that goes fast. So let's see if she likes us on the first.
Okay,
go.
Let's cross your fingers.
Oh, we're almost there. Yeah, give her a bit more air with me. All right. Well, she said no. But that's where, you got to get used to rejection. It happens now and again.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. No, it's fun though, because it is one of those things where you do have to be patient with it, and it's one of the things in smithing. You can't rush stuff.
Well, and that's an expected thing, I would imagine, to happen. Like, because you need, do you need to get like a mix of air with the propane and the oxygen?
Yeah.
How does that work? Like,
so it's honestly a bit of it is, it's a bit of an art there where you're trying to balance that. Again, this one's a bit old. She's got some complaints. And all, but yeah, it really just depends on what your setup is, because some of them are quite different, some of them are quite efficient. I could be doing a spark in here too, but that's like a little spicy, But yeah, we'll give this a second go.
Okay,
here.
sounds good. Okay, welcome once again to the Windy City's finest.
Yeah.
Here goes for take 3. We just had to go and grab quickly some more fuel, but like I said, it's a patience game, right?
It is.
You got to mix that oxygen
Yeah.
in with the propane.
Yeah.
So
We could say that she's camera shy, you know.
yeah.
That is a thing, you know? It is funny because like it's one of those things where quite often like it gets going pretty darn quick, but now and again it needs a little bit more patience.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Oh, it's trying. It's neat because you can hear by the sound. I don't know how well it's coming through, but
well, I can see how it's just kind of rolling up as well too on the sides.
oh man, just burning right off today.
There we go.
Huzzah! We have fire.
We have fire.
There we go. Excellent.
Wow, that is cool.
Yeah.
Just like a jet, basically. It's just coming down.
There we are.
And then we close off the back as well too.
Yeah. Because at this point now, we also want to be trapping the heat in there. It is a large forge by many standards, which has benefits for sure. I can do larger, wider projects and such, but we also want to ensure that the heat actually stays in there.
Right.
Which sounds kind of funny on a hot day like today, but you know, this is going to be a few hundred degrees hotter than that.
Right.
So,
okay.
We'll get at it. And this will take a moment for these to heat up. What I've got going on here is kind of a mix of some fun projects that we can mix in. And I figure for us, we'll try to do a bit of a bottle opener or something fun like that.
Okay, that sounds easy enough for me too.
Yeah. It's a good starter project, much nicer than tongs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just pop these in here for later.
So how long does this typically take to heat up?
Depends on the temperature.
Depends on the temperature outside.
So like today, it'll be pretty quick. You know, a couple of minutes, few minutes here. It's kind of neat because you'll be able to see. You know, earlier I said hot metal looks like cold metal.
Right.
That's true until you get past a certain point. These will get past that point pretty quick, and then they'll actually go to what's called an amber heat.
Right.
Blacksmiths use colors to talk about temperature.
Okay.
So often that's an age-old thing where they didn't have thermometers that they can actually see how hot it was.
And that varies per material, right? Because different materials have a different like high temperature points. And
totally.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. And so with this one, you know, it'll start from the iron and work up into kind of these orangish colors, and then I'll pull some out and show you when we get to a hotter point.
Okay.
And then you'll be able to see what those are like. And we might even try, we'll see how things go throughout the day, but we might get around to heating it up a little hotter just to show some of those other colors and stuff. But it's quite cool. And it does depend on what you got heating up. We are working with just some low carbon tooling steel right now, which is really nice for most of your projects. There's a lot of different types of steels, especially these days, different alloys and stuff. So depending on what you're trying to make, you'll want stuff with more carbon or less carbon. And again, there's a plethora of different things now that can be added to the metal to make it have certain qualities.
Right.
The two that blacksmiths really pay attention to is toughness and hardness.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically what that means is something that is really hard. Like this is an example, the anvil itself. Or also, let's go
Hardness
with,
could be dense, right? Like how dense is something?
more or less.
Yeah.
So like this is another example where we have a bit of an edge here. It's not a sharp edge. This is just for getting some lines and cutting. But if you're making something like an axe head or something that needs to hold an edge,
right.
But is not going to be, doesn't need to be flexible basically.
Right.
Then you want something to be very hard.
Okay.
But if you're making something that needs to be flexible but retain its shape, and so like a good example of a middle ground is like a blade, especially a longer blade, then you need it to be both tough, which allows it to flex on impact and absorb the impact, but hard enough to still hold an edge, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all about balance.
Yeah.
That's what I'm kind of gathering.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to the forge and when it comes to your final product, it's all about balancing every aspect of the steel.
Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting.
But
Very
yeah.
interesting.
While we're waiting for those to heat up, you got any questions like about tools or
Well,
anything else?
about the anvil, I guess, because
Yeah.
this is going to be the primary tool.
This
I see a couple holes here, and I got a question about the horn. So let's talk about the holes here. What is this one here for?
So I always mix up the exact names, but one's a Hardy hole, the other's a Pritchell hole.
Okay.
The mix is depending on what kind of tools you're using. And so, for example, there's a lot of tools that smiths will make in a square shape that they can pop through here and then have a very specialized surface to hammer on. There.
Okay. Okay.
And then I'm pretty sure this is the Pritchell. Again, I'm just terrible with names.
No.
But this round one, is where you'd put like, I wonder if I have it today. I might have left it at home, but I have basically a spring where you can put something that it's a piece of metal that basically just curves out. I'm sure I have something similar here. This will work as a example where you pop this through. Theoretically, if you move that, thank you. So this will go something like this. You'll usually have a flat piece here, and then you would take a hammer and you would just give it a bit of a tap, which, if this was the right type of tool, would then pin what you're working to, or maybe if you had like a pattern or something, you'd pin it there with that, and then knock it on the side and pop it back out.
I see. So you can kind of build and hammer.
Exactly.
Okay, so these holes here help with the production process of a specific tool.
They add a lot of customizable options that you can work with as a smith. And again, you'll build a lot of your own tools for that.
Right.
And I've got a weird mix of stuff as well that I use. But the nice thing, and why I didn't bring this piece, or the piece that would go here to pin metals in, is we have a lovely assistant today. Yeah. And Smiths loved having some help around, because I mean, you'll find out it's pretty hard labor.
Okay.
And it's so handy to have another set of hands for sure.
Yeah,
So,
no, I can imagine for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
But
no,
it's a ton of fun.
that's very informative as well too. So I'm excited to, like I said, I got a gloved hand and I got a free hand as well too.
Exactly,
So
which is good.
happy to help out.
Often, and like you'll see me on and off different pieces throughout, and feel free to ask questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, because you'll usually want an ungloved hand for your hammering hand, just for a nicer grip, feels better, and it'll be just, you'll have more traction and everything, so that's good. But yeah, back to the anvil here. So this top bit is the face of the anvil. Ideally, a good way of knowing if you have a good anvil is this should be pretty smooth and without blemish. As you can see, she's got some personality. This has been pretty used and a bit abused,
But it has been used. So this was the forts, right?
So this has been the forts, and it's been here, I don't know exactly how long. It's not a, actually it could very well be an antique by now, but it's not part of the exhibit per se, in that it's too precious to use, but it is pretty darn old, probably older than you and I.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
That's totally fair. But yeah, you would typically have a nice smooth surface just to kind of help with the
because you want to make it flat, and think about it like if you got a knife, I might even have one kicking around.
Because that helps with creating those straight edges, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, you want that to be as even as you can. And there's a couple areas, like I'll actually tell you, because again, I've been using this anvil for a few years now. There's a couple areas that we will use that are a bit smoother, a bit nicer when we're trying to do something flat. Yeah.
Right on.
Going from there, the opposite now, when you're not trying to do something flat and you want to curve it, you have the horn of the anvil here. And this is phenomenal, because this is how you get nice curves going and started. You can obviously do like sharp edges with the face and the side, but the horn of the anvil is really where a lot of work happens. And as you can see, this one's taken a fair bit of abuse as well, but it's still very reliable.
Curved blades, horseshoes, like those types of items would all be.
Honestly, anything with a curve starts here. You'll see it. When I'm smithing here on special occasions, I mentioned making little gifts for the kids that come through. I'll do miniature horseshoes for them often. That's one of the things. Or Christmas time, I'll do little candy canes.
Right.
So like, there's a lot of work on this at that point. And people love that because it's so cool.
It's Clark and Perry on the case. Clark and Perry. Do what it takes. Clark and Perry. Investigate.
The activities and interests of local artists in the Windy City's finest throughout both Lethbridge and Medicine Hat, Alberta. Available on TELUS, Optic TV, On Demand, VidFlex, YouTube, and more for limited time only. Terms and conditions apply.